What is the problem with the Sixers team? They have so much talent on paper.
It hurts me to say this, but I'm going to say it. The problem is their coach, Brett Brown. I do not want this man fired. He's a good man. I think he's a good coach, but he'll never be accused of being a great coach. This team is underachieving, and I'm putting it right at his doorsteps. I got news. I hope that Brett Brown is listening to this. You are not the San Antonio Spurs. I was talking to somebody last night that reminded me of this. You know what? Tim Duncan ain't walking through that door. Tony Parker ain't walking through that door. Brett Brown is a prodigy of the Spurs system, doing things their way. You know what? Different system, different players. You don't have that in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is a star because he does so many things right. Shooting is not one of them. It is bad. And to give props to the person that I don't think should be talking basketball half the time, and Max Kellerman, who pointed out that Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid should not coexist. I don't agree with that, but there's an awful, and credit to Max, there's an awful lot of people in the NBA community that have spoken to me over the last 3 weeks or so who emphatically agree with Max Kellerman on that. So props to you for that. I don't agree with none of y'all, but you ain't alone. There's a whole bunch of people that feel that way, and I'll leave it to Max to get into that. Here's where I'm holding Brett Brown accountable. Who gets better under you? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're the coach, that's the ultimate question. And I got love for Elton Brand, who I thought did a fabulous job last year as executive for the Philadelphia 76ers. But right now, both Boston and Miami has a edge on you. They're tied for the 3 seed at 34-15, with Boston being the 3 seed with the edge right now. If the players were to begin today, Philly would be playing Boston, Max. Here's where the problem lies. The Miami Heat are better because they have Jimmy Butler, who was on the Sixers last year. You lose Jimmy Butler, he's in Miami. Oh, by the way, Al Horford, I'll leave that to you. Let's just say he was better in Boston last year. Oof. He's now in Philadelphia, okay? That's so Elton Brand doesn't get to escape in all of this, but I got faith in him, and I approved of the changes that he made at that particular time. But Brett Brown is what this comes down to. Ben Simmons has not improved his perimeter shot. He doesn't even attempt them. According to Brett Brown, that was something he wanted Ben Simmons to do. Ben Simmons is not doing that. Joel Embiid, he's not reliable durability-wise. We know he can play, but he doesn't look in the greatest shape in the world. You need that brother to be ready to go up against the Greek Freak. He ain't ready, okay? Not health-wise, not conditioning-wise. All of these things. Where's your shooter? Okay, you don't have that marksman, that specialist that Miami has in Duncan Robinson. That's a specialist. Hero can ball and shoot. None, he can ball and shoot. Jimmy Butler can ball and shoot. But Duncan Robinson, Duncan Robinson is a specialist. This brother bombs away. The Sixers don't have any of that. So I'm looking at the personnel, and I'm saying, okay, you have to adjust accordingly and play a different brand of basketball. I don't see that in Brett Brown. I don't see somebody that's galvanizing the troops. I don't see a coach that's got his team showing up on the road. Their record is awful on the road. I don't see elevated level play. We want to point the finger at Tobias Harris. I would remind y'all that Tobias Harris is averaging 19 a game on 47% shooting from the field. Now, I understand he could do better, but that's not god-awful. The reality is, I'm looking at Brett Brown. So everybody can't have it all, Max. Okay. As a coach, you got to be able to maximize what you got to work with. And I don't see him doing that. Floor is yours.
First of all, Embiid and Simmons are terrific players. Mm-hmm. I'd argue, actually, Ben Simmons is an elite NBA player right now.
Yeah, his defense
and that's without the shooting. Right. The defense is sensational. He can do so many things offensively. The two of them are an incredible amount of talent in a point guard center kind of combination.
Correct.
Young. They almost got to the finals last year, let's face it, right? They almost got by Kawhi last year. They came very close. And they would have a lot of success if they stayed together, but I believe they'd have more success if they weren't together. If you look at Ben Simmons and the Greek Freak, Ben Simmons ages 21, 22, 23, and just take a stat like PER. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a pretty good offensive measurement, better than just like points scored, right? Because it factors in points and rebounds and assists and turnovers and all those things. His PER year 1 was 20. That's good. That's almost an all-star. Year 2 was exactly 20 again.
Okay.
And year 3 was, so far, it's 20.8. It's almost the same thing. Oh, it's flat. The Greek Freak, who is similar. He's not as much of a point guard, obviously can't handle the same way, but long, lanky guy, can play defense, can pass the ball, those things, had to learn how to shoot. And Antetokounmpo in the same ages, his PER went from like 18 to 22 to 27 to now it's like 32. It's just the trajectory is up because they built a team around him. They play 5 out. They surrounded him with shooters and let him do his thing. So I think that is a mismatch. In other words, they're not getting as much out of the talent stacked to here, but the whole is not greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, you brought up something very interesting. Horford and Tobias Harris this year are making $60 million combined. Tobias Harris, everyone loves him around the league, right? But he's been awful this year. I don't care what he's shooting and the points. He's bad in transition. He doesn't make quick decisions. He never passes the ball. He doesn't play defense, although maybe a little more than given credit for recently. He has not played up to the contract. Horford has been Al Horford, who's one of my favorite players, who as recently as last year was the kind of guy, the more you watched him, the more you realize the stats don't even tell the story. He's so excellent. Both ends of the floor. Who can bring the ball up the floor and play the 5, defend the rim, defend in space, shoot the 3, do it play in the post, do whatever you want. Suddenly, can't play at all. At all. Either end of the floor, he's awful. Now, an interesting fact I discovered, do you know he never played the 4 on any level? Like you would think a guy who could play the 5, but he's out of position, out of sorts. It's not working. So why is this all happening? You point to Brett Brown. Stephen A., check this out. Let's kick it upstairs for a second. Elton Brand is the guy who paid max contracts to these guys, and it's not working to the extent that, like, you have $60 million in cap space. Embiid and Simmons do better than this. But let's kick it upstairs farther. Why is Elton Brand there? Because Brian Colangelo had to be let go. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.